Mason Cole opened his eyes slowly. His head hurt badly. He could taste blood in his mouth. The room around him was strange. It had curved walls that glowed with a soft blue light. Mason tried to remember what had happened before he woke up here. He had been on a planet called Proxima Centauri b. There was an attack. His team was helping people escape as alien ships came down from the sky. Then there was a bright flash. After that, nothing. Mason sat up. His body felt heavy and sore. He wore the same uniform from the battle, but his weapons were gone. The air in the room smelled sweet like cinnamon with a hint of something electric. He noticed he was not alone. In the corner stood a figure watching him. As his eyes adjusted to the dim light, Mason could see it was a woman, but not a human woman. Her skin was light purple and seemed to shine slightly when she moved. She had no hair on her head, but instead had beautiful patterns carved into her skin. Her eyes were completely black, like polished stones. Around her neck was a thin metal band. Human, she said. Her voice was musical but empty of feeling. You are now awake. I am Zara, given to you as reward for your capture. The matriarch values human warriors highly. Mason pushed himself to his feet. The room spun for a moment, but he steadied himself against the wall. Years of military training helped him stay calm despite his confusion. I don't want any rewards, he said firmly, and I don't want slaves. Where am I? What happened to my team? The alien woman tilted her head. She seemed confused by his response. You are on the Void Weaver. It is the main ship of the Zendari fleet. Your human friends escaped our attack. You were the only one we captured. Her long, thin fingers touched the collar around her neck. I have been bonded to you. This is a great honor among my people. Mason looked around the room carefully. There were no windows. He could not see any doors either, just smooth walls that pulsed with light. He was trapped. Your people attacked our colony. Why? Mason asked. The matriarch commands. We obey, Zara said simply. She seeks to expand our territory. Humans resist, so there is war. Mason walked around the room, feeling the walls with his hands. They were warm and seemed almost alive. What is this place made of? The ship is grown, not built. It lives. We shape living tissue into our vessels. That explained the strange feeling of the walls. The whole ship was a living thing. Mason found this both amazing and disturbing. I need to contact my people, Mason said. Zara shook her head. That is not allowed. You are now property of the Zendari, but you will be treated well, better than most humans we capture. Mason felt anger rising in him. I am not property, and neither are you, despite what your people believe. For a brief moment, something flashed in Zara's black eyes, something like surprise or interest. You are unusual for a human, she said. Most would have demanded service or tried to attack me by now. I'm a soldier, not a slave owner, Mason replied. He sat back down on the flat surface that served as a bed. How long have I been here? 3 of your Earth days. You were injured in the battle. We healed you. Mason touched his head where he remembered being hit. There was no wound, not even a scar. Their medical technology was clearly advanced. Where are we going? He asked. To the outer territories first. The matriarch wishes to display her new human warrior to the colony worlds, then to the home world for your formal presentation. Mason didn't like the sound of that. Being shown off, like a trophy animal, did not suggest a bright future. And you? What happens to you? He asked Zara. She seemed surprised by the question, as if no one had ever asked about her before. I go where you go. I am bound to you until your death or until the matriarch releases me. And you're okay with that? Being given to someone against your will? Zara looked around nervously. Her voice dropped to a whisper. The walls here. The ship reports to the matriarch. Mason understood. They were being watched, monitored. Zara could not speak freely. A section of the wall suddenly opened, revealing a corridor beyond. Zara straightened her posture. It is time for your feeding, she announced in her normal voice. Follow me. Mason followed her out of the room. The corridor was similar to his room, curved walls of the same living material, pulsing with light. They passed several Zendari, all female, with skin in different shades of purple and blue. They all had the same black eyes as Zara. Some wore elaborate clothing that seemed to mark their rank. Others wore simple coverings. They all stared at Mason as he passed. Some looked afraid, others looked angry, a few looked curious. The feeding area was a large room with several other aliens eating from bowls of colorful substances. Zara guided Mason to a small table and brought him a bowl of purple gel. "This is adapted for human digestion," she explained. "It will give you strength." Mason looked at the strange food with doubt. "What is it made from?" "You would not have words for the ingredients. It is safe." Mason was very hungry. He tried a small bite. It tasted better than it looked, sweet and filling. He ate more. "The matriarch has great plans for you," Zara said as he ate. Her voice was normal again, meant to be heard. "You will help us understand human military tactics." Mason stopped eating. "I won't help you fight my own people." Zara's face showed no reaction, but she leaned slightly closer. "You may find there are many ways to resist that are not obvious," she whispered, so softly he barely heard it. Before Mason could ask what, she meant another Zendari approached. This one had deep blue skin and wore an ornate uniform. Zara immediately lowered her head in respect. "Is the human specimen adapting well?" the officer asked Zara. "Yes, Commander. He is eating and shows no signs of illness." The commander looked at Mason with cold eyes. "Good. The matriarch's new pet should be healthy for his debut." She walked away without waiting for a response. Mason looked at Zara, who still kept her head down. When the commander was gone, Zara raised her eyes to meet his. "Finish your meal," she said. "You will need your strength in the days to come." Mason had a feeling Zara was trying to tell him something important. He didn't understand yet, but he would watch and listen carefully. If there was any chance of escape, or of understanding why he had really been kept alive, it would come through her. For now, he was a prisoner on a living ship, headed toward alien worlds, with only a mysterious slave as his ally. He would need all his military training and human ingenuity to survive what was coming. 3 days passed on the alien ship. Mason learned to tell time by the changing lights in the walls. The ship was alive, and it seemed to have its own day and night cycle. During the night, the blue glow dimmed to a soft purple. Mason was allowed to walk around certain parts of the ship with Zara always by his side. He learned many things about the Zendari during these walks. The Zendari were ruled by females. Males existed but were kept separate, used only for breeding. The entire society was built around ranks and classes. At the top was the matriarch, who ruled with absolute power. Below her were the commanders, then the warriors, then the workers. Lowest of all were the bonded, like Zara, who had been punished by being given as property to others. "What did you do to deserve punishment?" Mason asked Zara as they walked down a long corridor. Zara looked around before answering, making sure no one was close enough to hear. "I had ideas that were not acceptable," she said quietly. "What kind of ideas?" "That the Zendari could be different, that we could be free." Mason was surprised. So Zara was some kind of rebel. That explained why she seemed different from the other aliens he had met on the ship. "What was your job before?" he asked. "I was a biotechnician. I worked with the living, ships, and other biological technology." "You were a scientist?" Zara nodded. "The third biotechnician to the matriarch herself. I created ways to make our ships faster and stronger for war." Mason stopped walking. "You helped kill humans?" Zara's black eyes seemed to grow darker. "Yes. Many humans died because of my work. That is another reason I am being punished. My last project did not go as planned." They continued walking in silence. Mason had mixed feelings. On one hand, Zara had helped create weapons used against his people. On the other hand, she was now a prisoner like him, punished for wanting freedom. Later, back in Mason's room, Zara brought him another bowl of the purple food. As he ate, he noticed she seemed nervous. "What's wrong?" he asked. "We will reach the first colony world tomorrow," she said. "You will be displayed to the public. It will not be pleasant for you." Mason put down his bowl. "What exactly does displayed mean?" "You will be taken to the central square. The matriarch's image will speak to the crowd about the human threat and how you were captured. You will be evidence of our victory over Earth forces." "Propaganda," Mason said with disgust. Zara didn't understand the word. "It is to make our people feel strong and your people look weak." Mason stood up and paced the small room. "And what happens after we visit all these colony worlds?" "We go to the homeworld. There you will live in the matriarch's palace as a curiosity and a symbol of her power. And you'll stay with me? Until you die. Then I will be given to another or executed." Mason stopped pacing. "Executed? Why?" Zara touched the collar around her neck. "This is not just a symbol of my status. It contains a poison. If I try to escape, if I disobey, or if my master dies, it can be activated by the matriarch." Mason felt a chill. The situation was worse than he thought. "Zara, I need to escape. I need to get back to my people and warn them about what I've learned. But I won't leave you behind to die." Zara looked at him with surprise. "You would try to save me, after knowing I helped kill humans? You're a prisoner, just like me. And it sounds like you were already trying to change things before you met me." Zara moved closer to him. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "There are things I have not told you. Things I cannot say here, where the ship can hear." Mason nodded. He understood. The living ship itself was a spy for the matriarch. "Is there anywhere on this ship that's safe to talk?" he asked quietly. "Perhaps. There are places where the ship's nervous system is less developed, places where I used to work. Can you take me there?" Zara hesitated. "It would be dangerous. If we are caught in restricted areas, the punishment would be severe. I'm already a prisoner being taken to be shown off like an animal," Mason said. "I don't have much to lose." Zara studied his face. Something in her expression changed. "You, humans, are strange. You face hopeless situations with such determination." "Hope is what keeps us fighting," Mason said. "Now can you get us to one of these safe places or not?" "Yes," Zara finally said. "But we must wait for the sleep cycle, when fewer crew members are active." They waited several hours. The lights dimmed to their nighttime purple. Zara stood by the wall, placing her hand on its surface. She seemed to be feeling for something. "The ship is less aware now," she said. "Follow me, and move quietly." A section of wall opened. Instead of going into the main corridor, Zara led Mason into a narrow passage between the walls. It was hot and humid inside, and the passage was tight. The walls here were raw and unfinished, pulsing with veins and strange organs. "We are inside the maintenance channels," Zara explained. "Only biotechnicians use these paths." They crawled through the narrow space for what seemed like a long time. Sometimes they had to squeeze past large beating organs that Mason assumed were part of the ship's vital systems. Finally, they emerged into a small chamber filled with strange equipment. The walls here were covered with what looked like giant nerve endings connected to various machines. "This was my laboratory," Zara said. "The ship's awareness is minimal here because I modified it to protect my work." Mason looked around at the alien technology. "What were you working on that got you in trouble?" Zara went to a container on the wall and opened it. Inside was a vial of glowing blue liquid. "This," she said, holding it up. "The matriarch controls our people through a biological agent that affects our brains. It is given to all Zendaria at birth. It makes us obey without question." "Mind control?" Mason asked. "Yes, but I found a way to counter it." She held up the vial. "This can break the matriarch's hold on our minds." Mason was amazed. "So you were creating a cure, not a weapon?" "I was discovered before I could release it. As punishment, they made Mia bonded and gave me to you, a human enemy. The matriarch thought it was a fitting humiliation for me to serve a lesser species. But they let you keep your memories, your knowledge. That seems risky. Zara's expression darkened. The collar ensures my obedience, and they believe you will die on the homeworld anyway. Humans cannot survive the atmosphere for long. Mason felt a new wave of worry. They're taking me somewhere that will kill me? Eventually, yes. They have chambers with modified air for displaying alien specimens, but exposure adds up over time. Mason sat down on a strange, chair-like growth. So I'm being taken to my death, and you're tied to me with a poison collar. Great. Zara knelt before him. Her black eyes were intense. I have a plan, Mason Cole, but it requires great risk and complete trust between us. I'm listening. This ship, like all our vessels, is semi-sentient. It obeys the matriarch because it must. But if I could introduce my cure into its central nervous system, you could free the ship itself, Mason finished her thought. Make it an ally. Zara nodded. It would take time and we would need to access multiple points in the ship's neural network. But if we succeeded, we could take control of the Void Weaver. Mason stood up, feeling hope for the first time since his capture. A ship this size could do a lot of damage to the Zendari fleet. More than that, Zara said. It could send signals to other ships, spreading the cure. We could start a rebellion. Mason looked at Zara with new respect. She wasn't just a scientist or a rebel, she was a revolutionary. Why trust me with this? He asked. I'm your enemy. No, Zara said firmly. The matriarch is my enemy. She is the enemy of all free people, including humans. I believe you want freedom as much as I do. Mason extended his hand to her, a human gesture of agreement. After a moment of confusion, Zara took his hand in hers. Her skin was cool and smooth. Partners? Mason asked. Partners, Zara agreed. They spent the next few hours planning. Zara explained the ship's layout and the key points where they would need to introduce the cure. They would have to be careful. If they were caught, they would both be executed. Immediately. As they prepared to return to Mason's quarters before the ship's day cycle began, Zara put her hand on Mason's arm. There is something else you should know, she said. The matriarch is planning a major attack on your home system. That is why capturing a human soldier was so important to her. She wants to understand how your military thinks. Mason felt a chill run down his spine. Earth? They're planning to attack Earth? Yes, with a fleet larger than the one that attacked your colony. They will leave from the homeworld in 30 days. Mason's resolve hardened. Then we have 30 days to take this ship and warn my people. Can we do it? Zara's face was solemn. We can try. It is better to die fighting for freedom than to live as slaves. Mason nodded in agreement. As they made their way back through the narrow maintenance channels, he thought about the strange turn his life had taken. Captured by aliens, partnered with an alien rebel, planning to steal a living spaceship. It was more adventure than he had bargained for as a colonial defense soldier. But if their plan worked, he might save not just himself, but his entire species. And help free Zara's people in the process. It was worth any risk. The next day, the ship arrived at the first colony world. Mason stood in a large open area of the ship as it descended through the atmosphere. Through a clear section in the wall, he could see an alien city below. The buildings were curved and seemed to grow from the ground, much like the ship itself. Remember, Zara whispered to him. Show no weakness. The Zendari respect strength, even in enemies. Mason nodded. He wore his torn and damaged uniform. The aliens had cleaned it but left the battle damage visible, proof of the fight he had put up before capture. A tall Zendari with deep blue skin approached. She wore an ornate uniform covered in symbols of rank. The human will be taken to the display platform, she said to Zara. You will translate his words if he speaks. He is not to make any aggressive moves, or he will be stunned. Yes, Commander Vell, Zara replied, lowering her eyes respectfully. 4 armed guards surrounded Mason. They carried weapons that looked like extensions of their arms, living technology like the ship. The landing was smooth. Mason was led down a ramp and into the alien city. The air was thicker here than on the ship, with a sweet smell that made Mason feel slightly dizzy. The gravity was stronger too, making each step an effort. Crowds of Zendari lined the streets. They watched Mason with their black eyes, some pointing and talking among themselves. Many had never seen a human before. Mason kept his head high and his face expressionless. He would not give them the satisfaction of seeing fear. The display platform was in the center of a massive square. Thousands of Zendari had gathered to see the captured human. Mason was placed on the platform with guards on all sides. Zara stood just behind him. A massive hologram appeared above the crowd, the face of a Zendari with royal purple skin and elaborate markings covering her entire head. Her eyes were larger and deeper black than any Mason had seen. This could only be the matriarch. "My people," the giant face spoke, her voice booming across the square. "Behold a warrior of the human empire that dares to challenge our expansion." The crowd made a hissing sound that Mason assumed was their way of showing disapproval. This specimen fought bravely, but fell to our superior forces. So shall all humans who stand against us. Soon we will reach their home system and show them the true might of the Zendari dominion. The crowd erupted in sounds of approval. The matriarch's face turned to look directly at Mason. "Human, do you wish to speak to my people? To beg for mercy, perhaps?" Mason felt all eyes on him. This was a test. Show fear, and he would lose any chance of respect. "I have nothing to say to you," Mason replied firmly, "except that humans don't surrender easily. If you come to our home, you'll regret it." Zara translated his words. A murmur ran through the crowd. The matriarch's giant face showed anger for a moment, before settling back into a cold smile. "Brave words from a captured enemy. We shall see if your people show such courage when our armada arrives." The display continued for another hour. The matriarch spoke of past victories and future conquests. Mason was forced to stand there as a living trophy. His legs ached from the heavy gravity, but he refused to show weakness. Finally, it was over. Mason was led back to the ship, Zara following close behind. Once they were alone in his quarters, he collapsed onto the bed. "You did well," Zara told him. "Many in the crowd were impressed by your defiance." "Great," Mason said tiredly. "I impressed the aliens who want to destroy my homeworld." "It is important," Zara insisted. "The common people must see that humans are worthy opponents, not weak creatures to be easily conquered. It plants seeds of doubt about the war." Mason sat up. "How many more of these displays will there be?" 4 more colony worlds, then the homeworld. Each visit will last 1 or 2 days. So we have about 10 days before we reach the homeworld. 10 days to take control of this ship. Zara nodded. "I have been thinking about how to proceed. We must modify the neural nodes in sequence, starting with the outer nodes and working inward to the central brain." "When do we start?" "Tonight. During sleep cycle." That night they slipped back into the maintenance channels. Zara led Mason to a different part of the ship, far from her old laboratory. "This is a secondary neural node," she explained, as they entered a small chamber filled with pulsing tissue. "It controls the ship's outer sensory systems." Zara took out a small device she had hidden in her clothing. She connected it to what looked like a large nerve ending. She then injected a small amount of the blue liquid from her vial into the connection point. "What will this do?" Mason asked. "It will begin to break down the control pathways that link this node to the matriarch's commands, but slowly, so it won't be detected." They moved to another neural node and another, working through the sleep cycle. Each time, Zara would inject a tiny amount of her cure and make adjustments with her device. "The ship may begin to experience confusion," she told Mason as they finished the 5th node. "It might report errors or behave strangely. If anyone investigates, they will assume it is a minor malfunction." Over the next 3 days, as the ship visited the second colony world, Mason and Zara continued their work during each sleep cycle. They had to be careful not to be seen entering the maintenance channels. On the fourth day, Mason noticed changes in the ship. The lights would flicker occasionally. Sometimes doors would open slightly before closing again, as if the ship was testing its own systems. "It's working," Zara whispered excitedly. "The ship is beginning to break free of control." "Can it communicate with us yet?" Mason asked. "Not until we reach the central node. But it knows something is changing." On the fifth day, they arrived at the third colony world. This display was different. The crowd was smaller, and Mason noticed armed guards throughout the square. The matriarch's hologram seemed tense. "What's happening?" Mason asked Zara quietly as they returned to the ship. "There are rumors of rebellion on this colony," she replied softly. "Some Zendari have begun to question the matriarch's rule." This was good news. If discontent was already spreading, their plan might have more impact than they had hoped. That night, as they worked on another neural node, Zara suddenly froze. "Someone's coming," she whispered. They pressed themselves against the wall of the maintenance channel. Through a gap, they could see 3 Zendari technicians in the corridor outside. "The ship reported anomalies in Section 12, one was saying. "The commander wants a full diagnostic." "It's probably just stress from repeated atmospheric entries," another replied. "These old vessels weren't designed for so many planetfalls in quick succession." The technicians moved on, but the message was clear. The ship's strange behavior had been noticed. "We need to move faster," Mason said when they were alone again. "They're going to figure out something's wrong." Zara looked, worried. "If we rush, we risk alerting the central control systems. The ship might lock down completely. If we don't rush, we'll be caught." "How many more nodes do we need to modify?" 3 more, then the central brain. Mason made a decision. "Let's do 2 tonight, then the final one tomorrow night. Then we make our move on the central brain before we reach the homeworld." Zara agreed reluctantly. They worked quickly, injecting larger doses of the cure into the next 2 nodes. As they finished, the ship shuddered violently. "What was that?" Mason asked. Zara's face was tense. "The ship is fighting the control systems. We may have pushed too hard." An alarm began to sound, a pulsing organic wail that echoed through the living vessel. "We need to get back to my quarters," Mason said urgently. They hurried through the maintenance channels, hearing the sounds of running feet and shouted orders in the main corridors. Just as they reached the exit near Mason's room, the ship lurched again, throwing them against the wall. Zara's device fell from her hand, clattering to the floor of the main corridor as the maintenance channel door opened. A passing guard turned at the noise. Mason reacted instantly. He lunged forward, tackling the guard before she could raise her weapon. They struggled briefly before Mason struck a hard blow to the side of her head. The guard went limp. "Help me!" Mason gasped, dragging the unconscious guard into the maintenance channel. Zara grabbed the fallen device and helped Mason hide the guard in a narrow recess. "She'll be found eventually," Zara said. "By then, we need to be in control of this ship," Mason replied grimly. They made it back to Mason's quarters just as a general announcement echoed through the ship. The commander's voice ordered all crew to report to their stations and all passengers to remain in their quarters. "The ship is experiencing technical difficulties," the announcement said. "Remain calm and follow protocols." Mason looked at Zara. "Technical difficulties? Is that what they call it when a ship starts to develop free will?" Zara almost smiled. "They have no idea what's really happening, but they will investigate thoroughly now. Our next move will be much more dangerous." "We knew it would be risky from the start," Mason said. "But we're committed now, there's no going back." Zara sat beside him on the bed. For the first time, she seemed truly afraid. "If we fail, Mason Cole, they will make our deaths very slow and painful." Mason took her hand. Her skin was cool against his. "Then we won't fail. You're the smartest person on this ship, human or Zendari. If anyone can free a living spaceship from mind control, it's you." Zara looked at their joined, hands with curiosity. Humans have strange ways of showing support. The next day was tense. The ship skipped the planned visit to the fourth colony world and instead remained in orbit. Crew members rushed through corridors. Technicians swarmed the ship, checking systems and running tests. Mason was kept in his quarters with 2 guards posted outside. Zara was allowed to bring him food, but they couldn't speak freely. "They are scanning the entire neural network," Zara whispered, as she set down Mason's food. "They suspect sabotage, but don't know what kind." "How long until they find what we did?" Mason asked quietly. "Hours, maybe. They are moving inward from the outer systems just as we did." This was bad news. If the crew discovered their modifications before they could reach the central brain, all would be lost. "We need a distraction," Mason said. "Something to keep them busy while we make our final move." Zara nodded slightly. "I will think of something." She left, and Mason paced his small room. He examined every inch of it, looking for anything that might help them. There was nothing. The living walls gave him no weapons, no tools. Hours passed. Mason heard shouting in the corridors occasionally. The ship continued to behave strangely, lights flickering and gravity shifting slightly at times. Finally, Zara returned. Her face was grim. "They have found our modifications in 2 of the neural nodes," she said. "The commander has ordered a full lockdown and is calling in the Royal Guard from the planet below. They will search the entire ship." "When?" Mason asked. "The guard ships will dock in 6 hours, Mason thought quickly. "That's our window. We need to move tonight during the sleep cycle before the Royal Guard arrives." "The security will be heightened," Zara warned. "There are patrols in all main corridors." "What about the maintenance channels?" "They have placed sensors at the entrances, but—" Zara paused, thinking. "There is another way. The waste recycling tubes. They connect to all parts of the ship, including near the central brain chamber." Mason grimaced. "Waste recycling? You mean sewers?" "The ship processes all organic waste into nutrients. The tubes are unpleasant but not toxic to you." "Great," Mason sighed. "Crawling through alien sewage. Just what I always wanted to do." Zara looked serious. "It is very dangerous, Mason Cole. The tubes are monitored for blockages. If we are detected, the ship will flush the system with enzymes that would dissolve us." "Sounds delightful, but it's our only option, right?" Zara nodded. "I will return at the beginning of sleep cycle with equipment to help us breathe. The air in the tubes is poor." When Zara left, Mason prepared himself mentally for what was to come. He had been through tough situations before: combat drops under heavy fire, wilderness survival after transport crashes, but nothing quite like this. Zara returned as promised, carrying what looked like small masks. "These will filter the air," she explained, demonstrating how to wear one. "And I brought these." She pulled out 2 small weapons. They looked like short knives made of bone. "Where did you get these?" Mason asked, taking one. "From the guard I killed," Zara said simply. Mason stared at her. "You killed a guard? When?" "Just now." "I needed her access card to reach the equipment storage." Zara showed no emotion as she said this. "Her body is hidden, but it will be found eventually." Mason realized again how little he truly knew about Zara. She had been a high-ranking scientist who created weapons of war. Of course, she would be capable of killing when necessary. "Okay," he said, tucking the bone knife into his boot. "How do we get to these waste tubes?" Zara moved to the far wall of the room and pressed her hand against it in a specific pattern. A small section of the wall dissolved, revealing a narrow opening. "All crew quarters connect to the waste system," she explained. "We can enter here, but we must move quickly and quietly." The opening was barely large enough for Mason to squeeze through. Inside was a narrow tube made of the same living material as the rest of the ship, but darker and slick with moisture. It smelled like rotting fruit and chemicals. Mason put on his breathing mask and followed Zara into the tube. They had to crawl on hands and knees. The walls pulsed around them, moving waste materials through the ship's digestive system. "The central brain is 20 levels down," Zara whispered, her voice muffled by her mask. "We need to find a vertical tube." They crawled for what seemed like hours, turning at intersections based on Zara's knowledge of the ship's layout. Occasionally, they would freeze as they heard the sounds of crew members through the walls or felt the vibration of running feet. Finally, they reached a wider section where several tubes joined together. One large tube led straight down. "This vertical shaft goes down 10 levels, Zara said. "We will need to climb down." The tube was wide enough for them to brace themselves against opposite sides and inch downward. The walls were slippery, making the descent treacherous. Twice Mason nearly fell, catching himself just in time. At the bottom, they continued their crawl through horizontal tubes. Mason lost all sense of direction in the twisting passageways. He trusted Zara completely now. Without her, he would be hopelessly lost in this labyrinth. "We're close," Zara whispered after another long crawl. "The central brain chamber is just beyond this section." They came to a small junction where several tubes met. Zara pointed to a narrow opening above them. "That leads to a maintenance space behind the brain chamber. The guards won't expect anyone to come from there." They climbed up and squeezed through the opening. Beyond was a small space filled with neural connections, thick bundles of living tissue that pulsed with energy. Through gaps in these bundles, Mason could see the central brain chamber. It was a vast space with a huge crystalline structure at its center. The crystal glowed with blue light, sending pulses down countless neural pathways that connected to all parts of the ship. Around the crystal stood 6 Zendari guards with weapons ready. "That's the central brain?" Mason whispered. "Yes," Zara replied. "The crystal is a living computer, the true consciousness of the ship. All our vessels are grown around such crystals. How do we get past those guards?" Zara pulled out her vial of blue liquid. It was now only half full. "We don't need to. From here, I can inject the cure directly into the main neural trunk. It will reach the crystal through these pathways." She indicated a massive bundle of neural tissue that ran from their hiding spot toward the crystal. "Will it work from here?" "I thought we needed to be in the chamber itself." "It will work, but more slowly. And it might be detected before it takes full effect." Mason considered their options. If the guards realize what's happening, they could destroy the crystal, right? Yes, they would rather kill the ship than let it fall into enemy hands. Then we need to take them out first, Mason decided. A surprise attack. Zara looked doubtful. "There are 6 of them, and they are armed with neural disruptors. One hit would paralyze you instantly. Then we need a distraction." Mason looked around their hiding spot and noticed a cluster of what appeared to be control nodes, small crystalline growths connected to the neural bundles. "What are these for?" he asked. Zara examined them. "They regulate energy flow to different ship systems, life support, gravity, lighting." An idea formed in Mason's mind. "Can you use these to create chaos in the chamber? Shut off gravity or lights?" Zara thought for a moment, then nodded. "Yes, I can redirect energy surges through these nodes. It would be very disruptive." "Good. You create the distraction, I'll take out the guards, and then you inject the cure into the crystal directly." It was risky, but better than waiting to be discovered. Zara began working on the control nodes, connecting her device to them and making rapid adjustments. Mason prepared himself, gripping his bone knife tightly. "Ready," Zara whispered after a few minutes. "When I activate this, the gravity in the chamber will reverse, then the lights will fail. You will have moments of confusion to act." Mason nodded. "Do it." Zara pressed a sequence on her device. Immediately, shouts of surprise came from the chamber, as the guards were suddenly lifted off the floor, floating upward in the reversed gravity field. Seconds later, the lights went out, plunging the chamber into darkness with only the crystal's blue glow providing dim illumination. Mason burst from their hiding spot, pushing himself off the wall and sailing through the zero-gravity environment toward the nearest floating guard. Years of space combat training made him comfortable in zero-G while the guards flailed helplessly. He took out the first guard with a quick thrust of his knife, then pushed off the ceiling toward the next. The bone knife was incredibly sharp, cutting through the guard's throat easily. The remaining guards tried to aim their weapons, but in the darkness and confusion, they fired wildly. Mason dodged the energy blasts, using the floating bodies of the dead guards as shields. He dispatched 2 more guards in quick succession. The 5th guard managed to get off a shot that grazed Mason's arm, sending painful numbness through his left side. Gritting his teeth, Mason pushed through the pain and eliminated the 5th guard. The 6th had managed to brace herself against the crystal itself and was taking careful aim at Mason. Before she could fire, a bone knife flew through the air, striking her directly in the eye. She died instantly, her body floating away from the crystal. Mason looked back to see Zara emerging from their hiding spot, her face grim, but determined. "Nice throw," Mason said. The ship trembled continuously now, like an animal in pain. Mason kept his eye on the captured Zendari warriors while trying to understand what was happening through his connection with the ship's consciousness. Images and sensations flooded his mind, systems failing, emergency protocols activating, and beneath it all the ship's desperate struggle to maintain its newfound freedom. "You've doomed yourselves," the commander said, still bound by the living restraints. "Even if you stop the self-destruct sequence, battle cruisers have already been dispatched from the homeworld. They will blast this vessel into atoms." "How long until they arrive?" Mason asked. The commander smiled coldly. "Hours, perhaps less." Mason tried to hide his concern. He reached out mentally to the ship. "Can you move? Can we escape?" "Engines damaged," the ship replied in his mind. "Repairs underway. Need time." Time they likely didn't have. Mason needed to find Zara. "Watch them," he told the ship, gesturing to the prisoners. "Don't let them escape." "They will not escape," the ship assured him. Mason left the brain chamber and ran through corridors that were now in chaos. Crew members rushed about in panic. Some fought with others. Mason realized that as the ship broadcast its freedom, some Zendari were beginning to break free of the matriarch's control, while others remained loyal. The ship guided him with pulses of light along the walls, leading him toward the communication center where Zara was working. He found her surrounded by complex equipment, her hands moving rapidly over control surfaces as she made adjustments to the ship's communication array. "Zara, what's happening?" Mason called as he entered. She didn't look up from her work. "The cure is broadcasting. Many crew members are waking up fighting the matriarch's control, but the ship is badly damaged. The self-destruct protocols targeted critical systems. The commander says battle cruisers are on their way. We need to move the ship. I know, I'm trying to reroute power to the engines, but..." She was interrupted by a violent shudder that ran through the entire vessel. Warning lights flashed across the control panels. "Hull breach in lower sections," Zara reported grimly. "The ship is sealing it off, but we're losing stability." Mason moved to her side. "What can I do to help?" "The ship needs more power to complete repairs and move. There's an emergency power system, but it requires manual activation." "Where?" "Engine level, 4 decks down. The ship can guide you." Mason nodded and turned to leave, but Zara caught his arm. "Mason," she said urgently. "The collar." She touched the metal band around her neck. "If we move beyond the matriarch's control range, she might activate the poison remotely." Mason hadn't thought of that. "Can you remove it?" "No. It's biologically bonded to my nervous system. Only the matriarch can safely deactivate it." This complicated things. If they escaped, Zara might die. If they didn't, they would both die when the battle cruisers arrived. "We'll figure it out," Mason promised. "First, let's get the ship moving." Following the ship's guidance, Mason made his way down through increasingly damaged sections of the vessel. Twice he had to help injured crew members, Zendari, who had broken free of control, and were now allies. The engine level was hot and filled with smoke from damaged systems. The ship directed him to a massive chamber where a huge, heart-like organ pulsed weakly, surrounded by smaller supporting organs. "This is my heart," the ship told him. "The emergency system is there." An image appeared in Mason's mind, a crystalline structure embedded in the wall. Mason found it and placed his hand on the crystal as the ship instructed. Immediately, energy surged through him, painful, but not unbearable. The ship was using him as a conduit to jump-start its systems. The great heart began to beat stronger. The smaller organs around it pulsed with renewed energy. Throughout the ship, lights brightened and systems came back online. "Thank you," the ship said, returning to communication center. When Mason arrived back, he found the situation had changed dramatically. Zara was surrounded by a group of Zendari, but these weren't hostile. They were crew members who had broken free of the matriarch's control. "These are allies," Zara explained quickly. "Scientists and technicians who secretly questioned the matriarch's rule. They're helping repair the ship. We've received responses from 5 other vessels in nearby systems," one of the Zendari scientists reported. "They've successfully applied the cure to their systems and are breaking free of control. A rebellion has begun," another added. "But the royal fleet is still loyal to the matriarch. They will show no mercy when they find us." "Then we need to be gone before they arrive," Mason said. "Are the engines functional?" "Partially," Zara replied. "We can move, but not at full speed." "Navigation systems online," the ship announced, to all of them. "Plotting course." "Where can we go?" Mason asked. "We need somewhere to regroup, to plan our next move." The Zendari looked at each other uncertainly. One finally spoke up. "There are outlaw colonies in the Spiral Arm, places where those who question the matriarch have fled over centuries. They might shelter us." "Too obvious," Zara countered. "The matriarch will search there first." She turned to Mason. "What about human space? Your people are already at war with the Zendari. A defecting ship might be valuable to them." Mason considered this. "They might shoot first and ask questions later, but if we can communicate our situation..." He made a decision. "Set course for the Proxima Centauri colony. It's the closest human outpost." "The colony that was attacked?" Zara asked with concern. "Yes. They'll be on high alert, but they'll also have military commanders who can make decisions about accepting defectors." As the ship prepared to move, Mason took Zara aside. "We need to deal with your collar before we leave Zendari space." Zara touched the metal band. "I've been studying it through the ship's medical scanners. The poison delivery is triggered by a specific frequency from the matriarch's control systems. If we could block that frequency, the ship might be able to help," Mason suggested. "It has communication jamming capabilities, right?" They consulted with the ship, which confirmed it could generate a localized field around Zara that might block the trigger signal. "But it is not certain," the ship warned. "The collar may have backup systems." "It's a risk I must take," Zara said firmly. "Freedom is worth any risk." The ship created a small device that Zara attached to her collar. It would hopefully jam any signals from the matriarch. "Engines ready," the ship announced. "Departing now." The great vessel shuddered as its damaged engines powered up. Through the viewing portals, Mason could see the planet below growing smaller as they moved away from orbit. Multiple ships detected leaving the planet's surface, one of the Zendari reported urgently. "Royal battlecruisers. They're pursuing." "Maximum speed," Mason ordered. "Head for the system edge." The ship accelerated, straining its damaged systems. Mason could feel its pain through their mental connection, but also its determination. "Can we fight?" he asked the Zendari crew. "Our weapon systems are at 30% capacity," one replied. "The battlecruisers outgun us significantly." "Then, we run," Mason decided. On the viewing screens, they could see the pursuing ships, sleek, predatory vessels with glowing red patterns along their hulls. They were gaining rapidly. "They will be in weapons range in 4 minutes," a crew member reported. Zara worked frantically at a control panel. "I'm trying to boost engine efficiency, but the damage is too severe." "Alternative strategy available," the ship suddenly announced. "Near space fold." The Zendari crew looked shocked. "A fold? That technology is theoretical. No ship has successfully attempted it." "I have the knowledge," the ship insisted. "The matriarch prevented its use." "What's a near space fold?" Mason asked. "A method of faster-than-light travel," Zara explained quickly. "Different from our standard jump drives. It briefly folds space around the vessel, allowing it to slip through to another location. But it's highly dangerous and unpredictable. More dangerous than being blown apart by those battle cruisers? Mason asked. No one argued with that logic. How do we do it? Zara asked the ship. Channel all power to the crystal heart. I will do the rest. The crew rushed to make the necessary adjustments. Energy was diverted from all non-essential systems. The lights dimmed throughout the ship. Battle cruisers entering weapons range, someone reported tensely. Fold initiating, the ship announced. Brace for transition. The crystal in the brain chamber began to pulse with intense light. Energy patterns spread throughout the ship's neural network. The walls themselves seemed to vibrate at an impossible frequency. Mason felt a strange sensation, as if his body was being gently pulled in all directions at once. The viewing screens showed the stars stretching into lines of light. Energy spike from the lead battle cruiser, a crew member shouted. They're firing! Before the weapons could reach them, reality itself seemed to bend. The ship and everyone in it stretched impossibly thin, then snapped like a rubber band. For an eternal moment, Mason experienced nothingness, not darkness, not light, simply non-existence. Then, with a jolt that knocked everyone off their feet, the ship reappeared in normal space. Status! Mason called out as he pulled himself up. The crew checked their systems. We're in the Proxima Centauri system, one reported in amazement. The fold worked. Damage report, Zara requested.